don't know when was the last time a foreign minister of India met students of Delhi University to talk about foreign policy. It didn't happen when I was in the university. That much I can tell you. So what has brought me here? What has changed? I think the world has changed. India certainly has changed. But I think all of you have also changed. That your understanding of the world, your connection with the world, the impact that you will and are making on the world and the world is making on you, I think all of that has changed. Now, I am to speak to you about the G20 presidency and its global impact, which I will. But before I do that, I want to share with you a few experiences that I've had, you can say, on the road as a traveling minister of this government. And I'll start with the most recent one. We were at the BRICS summit in South Africa last week. We were physically there, but we were mentally in Bengaluru. We were mentally in Bengaluru because all the while the thoughts in Prime Minister's mind, in ours as well, was Chandrayaan. So, and you know, it was visible. It would keep coming up in the meetings, it would come up in the conversations. Others brought it up. Our host, South African president, actually publicly expressed good wishes for our success. And in between the conference, we took a break because we all wanted to see the actual landing. And that evening, this was a BRICS conference, okay? This was a BRICS summit. So this is India, Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa. There were about maybe another 50 countries, maybe 70 countries who were invited, about 45, 50 of them were at the President, Prime Minister level. But that evening, there was only one topic of conversation. That topic of conversation was the Chandrayaan landing. And the most, to me, I mean, one was, you know, it's like you feel you are on a big stage, something big has happened in your country, you're already like little bit walking a little bit taller and higher. But the greatest satisfaction for me that day was this sense from all the leaders that India has done it, but we, you know, the leaders of Africa, of Latin America, of Asia, we also see this as something as motivating, as you know, it is your success, but we also feel somewhere it is our success. We share it, we are happy, it's like a family member doing something very well. Now, I start with this experience because especially the young people of India have to understand that everything you are doing, will do, your dreams, your aspirations, your achievements, they are no longer going to be contained within the borders of India. That we are already through, you know, Vice Chancellor spoke today of India as almost a $3.8 trillion economy. But it is not just the statistics, it's not the prosperity, it is the sense that day in the room. And you know, some of the presidents said this because actually this was a big hall, you know, the long table, there were 150 people there. And actually they all stood up and Prime Minister had to walk down the row shaking hands with people. But the one message was, you know, what you have done is also inspiring the rest of the world. So that is the first experience I want to share with you. The second experience actually emanates with COVID. I have shared already in public many stories about the COVID. Some of you may have seen it in some reel somewhere. I think you would be familiar, for example, that experience I recounted, that my COVID certificate was on my phone. And in America, my son was pulling out something from his wallet, one parchi folded up saying, "Acha, this is mine." But I'll tell you a different story. Last year, every year the world gathers in New York for the UN General Assembly. Almost all countries of the world come, the leaders come, the ministers come, prime ministers, presidents. Normally, we go around asking people, I'm from India, so we say, okay, we want to meet our counterparts. Last year, a number of my colleagues, foreign ministers of other countries, counterparts, they actually said, we would like to do an event with you. We would like to do that event because we are the countries who received the COVID vaccine. So we want an opportunity. We want an opportunity to actually express our thanks. Now, they spoke, and they all spoke from their heart. Now, and for me, the most moving sentence was actually, I think it was my colleague from Jamaica, who said, "I carry vaccine Maitri inside me." So the impact we had through COVID, because all of them said the message was, look, we are the foreign ministers of Africa, of Caribbean, of Latin America, of South Pacific. We know there were stockpiles of vaccine close to us produced by other countries. We did not get it from them. We got it from you. And you were far away. So, the first point I made to you was the impact that our success will have on the world. The second point I make to you is how we are today, the generosity of India. When you say that in G20, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, when we say one earth, one family, one future, the world believes us. They do not think this is an empty slogan made for a conference. They actually have seen in the behavior of India in the most difficult times, when there were countries who had stockpiled 5-6 times the number of people, they had stockpiled that many doses of vaccines. They would not give it to a small neighbor next to them. And people saw that there was a different country, one which was vaccinating its own people, and while it was vaccinating its own people, was ready to share with the rest of the world. That's my second story. I'll give you one more, and then I will come to the G20. Last year, end of last year, I had gone to abroad, to the Middle East, to West Asia, to invite a president of a country to visit India. So I was carrying a letter from Prime Minister Modi. And, normally foreign minister meets the president, somebody says, "Acha, you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes, please, ज़्यादा time nahi lijiye, next appointment is on the way." So they give you a slot. I'm a time conscious guy. I gave my invitation, gave Prime Minister Modi's regards. We did about 10 minutes of polite talking. Then that president actually said, "I have some things I want to ask you." He said, "I hear in India that you are today able to reach very large sections of your population because of your digital capability. So tell me a little bit about it." Now I started to speak. You ask a cabinet member of the Modi government to speak about what has happened last 10 years. Obviously you are not going to stop. You're going to speak one after another. you will speak about housing, you will speak about giving food support, you will speak about Jan Arogya Yojana, Awas Yojana, Ujjwala. Now, people kept coming and sort of looking at it saying, hey, Niccolo, you had 15 minutes of 15 has become 20, has become 25. That president was completely focused on it. He actually told me, he said, just ignore those people. And he told me at the end of it all, he said, everything that you are doing applies equally in my country. Everything. So, why I say this to you is, I spoke to you about the impact we are making, the motivational impact. I spoke to you about generosity of heart. But you must also realize everything we are doing today is relevant to the world. It is relevant not just to the developing world, it is relevant even to the developed world. And it is, I give you an example of it. Just a few days ago, the Financial Times had an article. The Financial Times article pointed out, it said the number of cashless financial transactions in India last year were 90 billion. Okay? Oh, wait. Do you know how many cashless transactions there were in America? Would anybody even like to guess? 2.8 billion. Even China had 17.6 billion. So I want especially the young people to understand this. You are embracing change on a scale and intensity with a passion. Even you don't know the revolution you are creating around you. This is today the new India. This is the India which, if it carries on for the next 25 years, will be the Viksit Bharat that we are all aspiring to. So, I must tell you, the reason the foreign minister has come is to draw encouragement, hope, sustenance from all of you, but also tell you that this 25 years is your era. It's your achievements, your talents, your motivation that will decide really where India is going. Now, I have spoken to you about the world, about, in a way, some of the achievements which has had an impact. But the truth is also, the world is a very tough place. The world is a very tough place. You can see that, you saw it during COVID. You can see it in terms of today, the impact of conflict. You can see it in terms of the security challenges. You can see it in terms of climate events. So, but what is necessary for all of us to understand is that the world matters to us. That era where the world was beyond our borders and we were safe inside our borders, that era is now over. Borders are actually, in terms of sovereignty, extremely important. But when we speak about globalization, everything that happens in the world outside will impact your life, and everything you are doing here, particularly if you are doing it on scale, in terms of a different level of achievement, that will also impact the world. And I say this to you because this is today the world in which we have assumed the G20 presidency. So why is our G20 presidency different? Because, there have been other countries who have done G20 for a variety of reasons. The first reason is actually the chair. The fact is, India has assumed the G20 presidency at a moment when India is mattering more and more to the world. It is mattering more to its world, partly because of our economic achievements, that from number 12 or number 10, we have now become the number 5 economy. It is mattering because today, whether it's technology, it could be digital, it could be our talent. I gave you Chandrayaan as an example, but you can see it in other ways as well. That we are today recognized as essential to the global workplace, to the global talent pool. It matters because we also today have demonstrated a capability. We have demonstrated a capability of helping other countries. I spoke to you about vaccine supplies, but you can see even today in, some country has an earthquake. Turkey had an earthquake earlier this year. We were among the first countries who were able to send a contingent out there to rescue people. But it's also because we look after our people. The respect that we get in the world because we look after our people. When we went into Ukraine under Operation Ganga to get our students out, or when we went to Sudan under Operation Kaveri to rescue people, 5,000 people who are working in Sudan. So in the eyes of the world today, it is our economic achievements, it's our technology capabilities, it's our talent pool, it is actually our capabilities, and it is a fact that all of this is done as a democracy. This combination puts India in a very special position, and therefore India's presidency of the G20 has expectations and responsibilities which are very exceptional. Now, one part of it is, as I say, it's about us and how we are perceived. But it's also the decisions we made about how we are going to conduct our presidency. Typically, a presidency is done in meetings. I have attended maybe more than 10 G20 meetings in my life. Mostly conference hall hota hai, log aate hain, airport se conference hall jate hain, meet, have a dinner, sign some piece of paper and you go. So if you look at the impact on the society or the input of the society, there is very little. This G20 presidency is completely different. We use the word Jan Bhagedari, and truly we mean it. This is the first G20 certainly I have seen in my long career, where the people of the country, where every region, multiple cities, different walks of life, from colleges to professional associations to the ordinary citizen, feels connected to that G20. And we are doing it because in Prime Minister Modi's view, in his vision, we want to use the G20 to prepare to make the world ready for India, that India which all of you are going to make. We also want India to be ready for the world. We want especially the younger generation, and we want the cities and towns and the states and union territories of India to actually understand fully the opportunities and the possibilities in the world out there. And in the last year, the difference we have been able to make is we have not done the G20 as an official program, we have done it as a national celebration. And that is actually a G20 with a difference. Now, what is the challenge in the G20? There are two big challenges. One is what is called the divide between the North and the South. The developed North is a term for developed countries. South is a term for developing countries. So Viksit desh hai, jo vikashsheel desh hai. So their gap, their divide which has been growing. And secondly, the polarization that we see today between what you can call the East and the West, particularly as a result of the Ukraine conflict. So you have an East-West problem, you have a North-South problem. Guess who is in the middle? That's us. It is our responsibility today to find a way of bringing the world together. And we are confident of discharging this responsibility precisely because, as I said, we have today a respect in the world coming from our governance, coming from our economy, coming from our technology, coming from our independent foreign policy stance. So that sense today that this is a fair India, a generous India, a connected India, that these people will conduct their presidency responsibly, taking every view into account and find a landing ground which will be acceptable to everybody. That is today the task before the G20. Now, I had mentioned the world is a very difficult place, and it is a difficult place because, as I noted, we had a once-in-a-century pandemic, COVID, and COVID has had a terrible consequence across the world. You know, there are parts, in India at least we have recovered in many ways. I must tell you, many parts, many countries have not been able to recover the manner in which we have. Secondly, the conflict, because again, it has shown today how much the world matters to us. That a conflict is taking place in Ukraine, an entire continent away. And that conflict is today creating problems in fuel cost, in availability and prices of food grains, in the access to and the price of fertilizers. It is actually creating inflation across the global economy. So the COVID, 3 years of COVID, a year of this conflict, already large parts of the world were struggling with debt issues, trade issues. And then we are seeing more and more climate events. And climate events of a very large kind, which actually impact an entire economy, entire country, sometimes an entire continent. So how is this reflected? We are seeing this in the challenges that we have to address. The debt and inflation, I spoke to you. You know, by the end of this decade, we are supposed, all the developing world, we should have attained what are called sustainable development goals. That means better health, better education, better literacy, better nutrition, better living, better water, better energy. The truth is, after 3 years of COVID, a year of this conflict, other problems created by globalization, the world is not going to get to its targets. This is one of our biggest worries. A second big worry, everybody says climate action, but the resources for the climate action are not there. Countries are not putting, especially the developed countries, are not putting the money which they had committed to. So how do we today address these problems? These are really the big concerns. And these concerns, you know, it starts somewhere, it will end up somewhere else. I mean, the moment, for example, you see that there is less resource for education or for health, in almost every society, the impact is borne more by girls than by boys. Because every family, family in the world prioritizes. So what happens is, you can have a situation where the resources of the society are less. We think of it as a budget problem, we think of it as a debt problem, but it is finally a social problem. That if there is somebody who doesn't go to school, sadly, it is often the girl who doesn't go to school. If somebody's health or there's a shortage of food, you know. So all the progress that the world has made in terms of health, in terms of nutrition, in terms of gender, in terms of education and literacy, today these are the question marks which are facing the world. This is why today our G20 presidency is exceptionally important. That we have to get the world to focus on the real problems. These are the real problems of the world. And when we take the lead, because as I said, we are seen as a fair country, we are seen as a generous country, we are seen as a country which has always thought of the world while thinking of itself. So we have the credibility today to lead, especially in the last 10 years, when people have seen, the world has seen, we have built an inclusive society in India. And they know that a country which builds inclusiveness at home will also support justice abroad. So what we did this year was that we started our G20 in a very unusual way. We started it not by engaging our G20 partners. We deliberately engaged the countries who are not coming for the G20. We asked 125 countries who are the developing countries of the world and told them, saying, look, we will be talking to those 20 and there are another 9 countries who will be guests. So these 30. But you have concerns. You are worried about sustainable development goals. You are worried about debt. You are worried about climate. You are worried about gender. You are worried about health. So we sat with them, Prime Minister himself and many of us ministers. We sat with 125 countries in January of this year for what we called the Voice of the Global South. So this G20 will be a different G20 because we have made Global South not only part of the lexicon of international relations, we have put Global South on the conscience of the world. That is what will actually play out in the first week of September. So do understand today that in all of this, our achievements, our capabilities, everything that we have done, because I must tell you, when, as someone who probably spends half my time traveling abroad, the world is fascinated by what is happening in India. That when the conversation I spoke to you about, that when I tell a foreign leader, we give food support to 800 million people, they cannot believe that number. When you tell them that under, say, Mudra, we give loans to 400 million people, that under Awas Yojana, and all of this is in the last 10 years, that in 10 years, 150 million people are living in new homes because of the support given by the government. 95 million women today are not breathing firewood because of the Ujjwala program. That you have, as I said, Anna Yojana, 80 crores, 800 million people who get the essential nutrition because of food from the government. Or under the Jan Arogya Yojana, 1/3 of our country, more than 1/3 of our country today, is actually getting access to health. And all of this is possible, just like those cashless financial transactions. It is possible because we have today made that big leap into becoming a digital society. That digital society is the basis for the good governance that we have seen for the last 10 years. And if we can take it forward for another generation, for 25 years more, I can assure you that we will be in a completely different zone. So what I would like to do is finally, because I want to leave some time for questions. So I will end finally with one more thought for your consideration. I've spoken about our achievements, about technology, about leadership, about vision. But finally, never underestimate the power of ideas. That today, India is actually seen, and our Prime Minister personally is seen, as a very powerful propagator of ideas. And I saw that for myself when I was still ambassador in the United States in 2014. He came up with the idea of an International Day of Yoga. Okay. To be very honest, many of us, and I would admit to you very honestly, I myself didn't fully appreciate what a global impact it would make if you can actually get the entire world on a single day to realize what the practice of yoga, what the benefits of yoga can be. And if you see since then, we have changed the world's thinking about solar energy through the International Solar Alliance. Today, we are trying to change the world's food habits through the International Year of Millets. We have created a collective way of responding to disasters through a coalition of disaster response. In fact, one of the really imaginative ideas is something called one sun, one world, one grid, where actually you can keep generating energy as the sun travels through the world, and if you have the grid will keep passing that energy. So the whole perception today of India is not just a happening place where these big leaps of technology are made. It is also a place, a country which is today seen as responsible, which is seen as innovative, which is seen as actually driving global progress. I think that is the biggest inheritance that we can give to the up and coming generations. So I am very confident that when one day you will all look back, you will all remember 2023. 2023 as a big year for India, as a year when our G20 presidency put us on a different place in the map of the world. And that is not just a memory I want you to have. I want you to think of that as a baseline from which all of you then took this country over the next 25 years during the Amrit Kaal to the goal of having a Viksit Bharat. So once again, really, thank you for turning out in such large numbers. I'm really very, very touched. And I can stand here. Okay, I'll sit there perhaps and be happy to respond to any questions.